She pressed go live. At 904 p.m., at 912, the ambulance was already too late. You're about to see why the final 8 minutes, laggy, glitch-patched, chat screaming in caps, weren't an accident, and why the silence afterward was the loudest confession the internet never heard. Lila Verma didn't chase danger. She followed the map we drew for her with clicks, dares, and brand codes that expire at midnight. When the stream cut in the stairwell, most viewers thought it was theater. When the echo hit a beat too late, a stranger heard timing. The truth hides in small things: a push notification, a repost at 857, a door that needs a key card, and a man who shouldn't known which one. Keep watching. Not for gore, not for schadenfreude, but for a breadcrumb trail left by an algorithm that rewards escalation and a follower who learned to predict it better than she did. Influence is a staircase with no top floor. Each step promises the view you were denied at the last, and each landing is lined with sponsors reminding you where the railings are, until the numbers sag and the railings vanish. Lila wasn't reckless by default. She was careful in a world that punishes careful. On her channel, safety was a punchline under a million fire emojis, and escalation was a rhythm: rooftops to tunnels to haunted hotels, because the comments demanded real risk, and the calendar demanded bigger by Friday. The night she chose the abandoned Haviland Hotel, the plan was simple: walk through, lore dump, exit before security. The variable wasn't ghosts. It was predictability. The posts that teased the location, the sponsor countdown timer, the cross-posted schedule. Together, they drew a dotted line from her apartment door to the corridor where the stream went dark. Jonah called it managed danger. He built redundancies, spare batteries, offline maps, a buddy code word, Clementine, that never made it into streams. He'd mapped exits, logged guard rotations, and still the worst risk lived where planning couldn't reach the audience. Not the majority, just the one determined outlier who studies your patterns like scripture. The city felt complicit: broken sensors, doors that forget to lock, a staircase that doubles as a megaphone. When Lila went live, Jonah watched bitrate and lag, not the chat's rising panic. The delay that only a stalker would celebrate, 3 seconds of cushion between "where are you?" and "I'm right behind you," was hidden in the network's shrug. And when she hit the stairwell, the echo didn't just carry her footsteps. It carried his. Mara's job was to turn disasters into deliverables. She could schedule grief with the precision of a product launch, and she hated herself for being good at it. But before the spin comes the scream. She read the sponsor brief: authenticity, edgier, urban thrill, no explicit harm. The brief was a talisman against liability, as if language could sponge risk from reality. At 909 p.m., her screen became a strobe of mentions. A rival creator, quote, tweeted Lila's teaser, "Bet she chickens out," and Mara watched the retweets form a current that pushed Lila deeper into the corridor. No one told Lila to stay when she got scared. No one told her she could turn back and keep her deal. Contracts say deliverables, not alive. And then there was Evan Glashalo, the follower who never broke a rule because he learned to live just outside them. He built calendars from her uploads, mapped taxi sightings from reflections in sunglasses, read timestamp shadows the way sailors read stars. When Lila teased Haviland, he didn't need the address. He needed 10 minutes in a bus route. The horror of the final video isn't supernatural. It's logistic. A man who understood the cadence of virality and the brittleness of locks. He knew when chat would overwhelm her ears, when the delay would smother a warning, when a keycard rejected twice becomes a third attempt. He knew the moment a creator stops being a person and becomes a predictable schedule. That's when he stepped into frame. Just off camera. Growth is not a straight line. It's a treadmill disguised as a staircase, always accelerating a notch when you don't notice. Lila learned the rhythm the way musicians Learn an audience's breath post at dusk, tease at noon, reply to comments within the golden 15. The brand kits multiplied like kudzu, energy drinks, sneakers, a fearless fragrance that smelled like citrus and liability. Every deal came with a calendar entry and a clause about momentum. She knew her audience by the shapes of their demands. The way requests shifted from, "Do you?" to "Do more." Then, "Do it live." She told herself the risk was the persona. You could put it on, take it off, and hang it beside the ring light. But personas leak. The algorithm doesn't care about hers or yours, only that the graph keeps climbing. So she learned to escalate in thumbnails first, then in stunts, just enough to flirt with danger without marrying it, until flirting became the content, and content became a promise she didn't know how to break. The parasocial bond isn't a bond, it's a mirror that talks back. Lila read devotion written in typos and late-night confessions, heartfelt DMs that started, "You saved me," and ended, "Do this for me." Love arrived as metrics average watch time. Retention spikes at the exact second. She said she was afraid. Fear was lucrative. She tried to reclaim it by scripting dread into jokes, softening edges with emojis, but the numbers were indifferent to comfort. Mod teams blocked the worst, but obsession is fluent in loopholes, and 1,000 quiet demands will wear a person down more efficiently than one loud threat. She kept telling herself the audience wanted bravado, not pain, so she learned to swallow panic until it looked like poise, and to smile through the part where her heart sprinted. The strange thing about performance is how convincingly it borrows from truth, until the borrowing feels like theft, and you realize what's missing is sleep, boundaries, and the permission to say no. Jonah saw the machine from backstage, where the glamour evaporates and batteries die in cold air. He tracked patterns with the superstition of a pilot: never start a stream on a fresh update, never trust a building that keeps perfect time, never ignore the hair on neck feeling, because the chat thinks it's content. He argued for controlled shoots, for location permits that would make the thrill less spontaneous but more survivable. He lost most arguments to math. A spike here, a plateau there, and suddenly safety looked like sabotage. Still, he built rituals to fight entropy. Redundant audio, off-grid comms, dead man timers he pinged with his thumb. He believed in planning the way. Divers believe in surface intervals non-negotiable. Yet even he couldn't plan around what he couldn't see. The quiet outlier who studies not your craft but your clock, who reduces your precautions to props, and waits for the one moment when caution looks like cowardice and you won't choose it. Mara's inbox was a ledger of risk translated into deliverables. She could read an NDA like a weather map, sense where storms gathered in pre-approved phrases. Sponsors spoke in euphemisms, edge with care, authentic tension, no graphic harm, as if danger could be bottled and poured without spilling. She pushed back where she could, buffer days, wellness clauses, an escape hatch that let creators pivot. Yet the ecosystem had a gravity stronger than policy. Rival channels gamified fear. The platforms celebrated breakout moments. News outlets chased the same clip dressed in ethics. She kept a message drafted for every outcome, from win to wound, and hated that her job required both. When she reviewed Lila's next quarter plan, the word escalation slid between bullet points like a stowaway. She stared at it, crossed it out, then watched it reappear in the sponsor revisions as crescendo. Different word, same cliff, your it shall tiwi. And your narrative saying Evan didn't build an audience, he built a map. He learned to read her public breadcrumbs like coordinates. A reflection in sunglasses becomes an intersection. A convenience store chime becomes a neighborhood. A cloud pattern over a skyline narrows a block. He never trespassed in comments because comments are traceable. He trespassed in inference. To him, Lila wasn't a person on a screen, but a sequence. Upload cadence, sponsor cadence, fear cadence. He grew fluent in the latency between her breath and the chat's reaction, the gap that makes real time feel almost real. That gap is a door. Open it, and you step into an unguarded moment where alarms haven't fired yet and colleagues think you're still elsewhere. He rehearsed in small ways, testing locks on public buildings, timing elevator cycles, learning which keycard readers fail with damp cards. By the time the hotel appeared in a tease, he didn't need to find her. He only needed to arrive when the narrative demanded it. Escalation began as a spreadsheet, not a dare. 5 episodes, each one louder rooftops, tunnels, bridge scaffolds. Then the Haviland finale with a live giveaway coded to viewer milestones. The plan hit its hazard inside incentives. Hit the mark. Unlock the next lock. Jonah objected to live for the last one. Recorded meant edits. Edits meant control. Lila said, "Control is what the audience assumes you have right before they click away." She storyboarded tension like a science slow approach, urban legends, a mid-roll joke to relax, then a corridor that eats sound. The team rehearsed bravery the way dancers rehearse breath. No one named the true antagonist because no one thought to. It's easy to negotiate with gravity. It never stays up late to study. The Haviland slot was inked for a Friday because Fridays forgive exhaustion. That choice mattered later. It placed her at a stairwell, just as the city quieted enough for footsteps to be counted like a countdown. The first DM from Glashalo slid in after an elevator shaft video. "You're different. You plan." Flattery is a solvent. It loosens boundaries a fraction at a time. He never demanded, he suggested, always with an understanding tone, as if he were a colleague optimizing beats. That corridor at Haviland, sound carries. Walk slow. Let them hear fear. Mods flagged him twice for persistence. But persistence isn't a violation when it wears politeness like a name tag. Jonah urged a hard block. Mara recommended a community post about safety. Lila defaulted to ignoring the industry's illusion of armor. The messages kept arriving, threaded with compliments and precise observations, reflections in a thrifted mirror, the angle of a skyline from her balcony. He called these tells, a gambler's term in a game that wasn't supposed to be zero-sum. She screenshotted, filed them, and told herself this was part of being known. Meanwhile, his accuracy improved, and accuracy is a kind of intimacy that shouldn't be free. They scouted Haviland at noon, the safest, lie building can tell. Sunlight tamed the mildew scent. Door frames looked ornamental instead of hungry. Jonah mapped exits, marked a stairwell as the quietest path, tested the notorious third-floor key reader, and logged its moodiness. Lila filmed B-roll on an old phone to avoid drawing attention. She joked about ghosts and meant none of it. A security guard wandered by, uninterested, proof that some thresholds still respect daylight. Evan watched the vlog preview that night and posted a fan thread about the hotel's lore. Buried mid-thread was a detail he shouldn't have known. Third floor door rejects twice, accepts on the third if you don't rush. It read like folklore. The kind of apocrypha that glues an audience to a moment. Jonah reread it 3 times and felt the air tighten, an omen disguised as engagement. When he asked where that tip came from, the replies were winks and gifs, laughter that didn't know what it was laughing at. Escalation thrives on rivals, because rivalry is the collaboration the algorithm understands. A competing creator teased a simultaneous stream, baiting Lila with side-by-side thumbnails saying hotel mythology, same color grade, louder promises. Sponsors love a race. Audiences love a split screen. Mara fought to move the date. The sponsor countered with bonuses if she held. Lila stared at 2 calendars and chose the one with a cliffhanger baked in. She prepped her audience with a rallying cry about doing fear smart, then scripted a safety spiel that would play as confidence. Jonah added a private failsafe as she said, "Clementine on comms." He'd cut signal and call the plan. It felt like an amulet. Useful because you hope you want. Evan watched the build-up unfold like weather models converging. He didn't need to manipulate any of it. Escalation is self-propelling once ego, money, and spectacle align. He only needed to be punctual. On launch day, the city wore rain like static. Lila posted a countdown in the chat filled with ritual emojis, inside jokes, and optimism that looks like community, until it looks like pressure. Jonah staged gear by the exit, then checked the stairwell camera they'd planted, a small eye against chaos. Mara drafted 3 statements for 3 outcomes, a superstition she called preparedness. Evan left his apartment with a transit card and nothing else, a pilgrim following an itinerary he didn't write. The elevator at Haviland jerked once and refused. So stairs it would be, narrow, echoing an acoustics lesson disguised as architecture. Lila breathed, smiled, and told the lens she was fine. The numbers climbed the way fear does quietly, then all at once. In the window reflection, a bus passed. In a pane of that bus, a face glanced up, not remarkable on its own, except that it would be the same face later, outside frame, matching its breathing to hers. The ultimatum arrived, wrapped in courtesy, a sponsor email with confetti emojis and a clause that read like a countdown. Hold the slot, deliver the crescendo, or the quarterly bonus evaporates into polite regret. On another screen, a rival's leak pulsed, grainy B-roll of Haviland's 3rd floor, and a caption daring her to prove the legends weren't props. Pressure doesn't shout, it harmonizes. The chat tuned itself to the key of dare, and suddenly, Lila's careful plan felt like a rehearsal for someone else's opening night. Mara argued for a move. Brand equity survives delays. But the leak metastasized into think pieces and side-by-side thumbnails that told a story where hesitation equals defeat. Jonah laid out contingencies like sandbags before a storm, his voice even, his eyes not. Lila listened to both and to the drumline of her own heartbeat. In the end, the choice wasn't between yes and no. It was between being author or subject. She picked the version that let her narrate. The rival's leak worked like solvent on boundaries. It didn't have to be accurate to be effective. A shaky hallway clip, a whisper about maintenance access, and suddenly speculation hardened into itinerary. Mara drafted a statement about safety and authenticity, a sentence that tried to hold 2 magnets apart. Jonah pinged the building's blueprints and found what the rumor got wrong, and what it got dangerously right. Lila scheduled a members-only pre-roll to set expectations, then felt the paradox bite. The more you frame safety, the more the audience smells risk. Meanwhile, Glassalo posted a lore thread that posed as fan service and read like reconnaissance, ending with a neat aphorism about fear being music if you count it. Lila closed the app and stared at her reflection, a person and a product overlapping until the edges blurred. The calculus was brutal and simple: control the narrative now, or become a reaction shot later. She picked control, knowing it would demand improv. They entered Haviland as rain softened into a hiss. The city's ambient noise turned low enough to hear nerves. Jonah tested comms and got the kind of static that feels intentional. Interference hates coincidence. Interference hates coincidence. The plan: lobby to 2nd floor, overlook. Then a controlled walk to the 3rd floor corridor for 10 minutes of live suspense before a clean exit. Mara sat in a rideshare nearby, dashboard lit with drafts and contingency calls, a quiet sentinel to the storm. The stairwell magnified tiny sounds: fabric whisper, clipped breath, a keycard rattling like dice. Lila kept tone steady, gifting the lens her bravery in curated servings. The chat oscillated between encouragement and double-dog dares, a pendulum that looks like love until it knocks something over. A door on 2 clumsy hinges breathed open somewhere above, a sigh shaped like invitation. Jonah squeezed the talk button and said he had her in his other hand. His thumb hovered over the failsafe that would cut the stream and cut their losses. The corridor felt engineered for rumor, carpet that swallowed footsteps, wallpaper patterned like static. Lila narrated urban lore with a scientist's calm, parceling breath, so the mic wouldn't turn it into panic. The key reader blinked red, then red again. The chat erupted with theories, bets, taunts, empathy, noise that congealed into a dare to try once more. She hesitated, the beat that separates caution from theater. And behind that pause lived a decade of content culture whispering that hesitation is dead air. She tried again. Green. The door acknowledged her like a slow nod. A gust brought in the scent of wet dust and something metallic, the flavor of old systems waking up. Jonah's monitor showed a fractional delay spike. Nothing catastrophic, everything consequential. Down the hall, a shadow accepted the geometry of a doorway and then reconsidered it. Lila steadied the frame and asked the audience if they could hear the building breathe. They could. And something else, nearly a harmony. Breaking points are quiet until they aren't. A phone vibration stacked over a heel scuff over a distant elevator whine. 3 notes that, combined, spelled timing. Lila delivered the line she'd rehearsed about fear and control, and somewhere between syllables, the stream hiccuped, dropping frames like breadcrumbs. Jonah reached for the fail-safes. Chat roared. No cuts. An audience voting with volume on a decision they wouldn't have to live with. Mara, parked under a streetlight, watched the lag curve, turn mean, and texted a single word. Out. Lila saw the message flash and lifted the lens anyway, refusing to be edited by a rumor. That's when the echo doubled. A second pattern, almost her footfall, almost her breath. She turned. The gimbal caught a smear of thrifted wool and a jawline arranged into a smile that never reached eyes. The mic clipped. The picture stuttered. In the final clean fragment, her mouth formed a word that was not the safe one. Then, the corridor took the sound, and the live badge stayed, and the feed went dark. The frame freezes. The badge still says, live. And the internet does what it always does with unfinished sentences. It finishes them for you. Clips multiply re-uploads with red circles and arrows. Slowed audio that promises a whisper you can't quite hear. A tabloid declares overdosed before a coroner has a clipboard. A fan forum insists it's scripted because terror that neat must be a narrative. Mara watches the first hour bloom into a taxonomy of certainty debunkers. Empathizers, cloud harvesters, amateur acousticians tracing echoes like constellations. Jonah replays the final seconds until the pixels lose their edges and become excuses. He wants to post a simple truth. We lost her. But truth doesn't trend unless it bleeds revelation. The ambulance report becomes a link. A rumor becomes a genre. In the eye of it, a community does what grief taught it, turns shock into a to-do list. Make a thread. Light a digital candle. Ask for more angles. Someone always asks for more. Corporate language arrives like rain on glass, soft, even designed to blur the view. The platform posts condolences threaded with policy, a reminder that safety is our top priority, and a promise of an internal review that reads like a seasonal ritual. Ava's statement is immaculate: no blame, no admission, a sorbet of compassion between courses of caution. Sponsors retweet with ribbons and a link to helplines. The algorithm, indifferent to tone, notices a surge in keywords and begins to recommend compilations titled like elegies and built like slot machines. Mara fights to pin a single message to the top of the storm: verified sources only. Respect for family, no speculation. It holds for an hour. Then someone finds deleted stories and resurrects them as prophecy, because grief plus hindsight equals oracles. The narrative drifts beyond stewardship. Jonah drafts a timeline. Legal redlines it into ellipses. In the silence between statements, the audience writes its own. Grief becomes a currency when the ad breaks start. Reaction videos sprout overnight, thumbnails of widened eyes, titles that promise empathy and deliver mid-rolls. Arrival posts a tearful remembrance framed by a sponsorship tag, insisting it's demonetized while merch links bloom beneath. Another creator offers safety tips inspired by Lila, a cottage industry spun from a cautionary tale, still warm. Mods chase conspiracy, spores across comment fields. Every deletion breeds 2 replacements. Jonah watches a frame-by-frame analysis that invents a third shadow, and wonders when guilt turned into sport. Mara drafts a cease and desist for the worst offenders, then deletes it. Strikes become content, too. The cruel math surface's attention is indifferent to motive, and the machine will metabolize either love or malice if it's fed on schedule. The only thing rarer than discretion is a pause. And pauses don't monetize. The vigil begins as candles on a sidewalk, and ends as a battlefield in comments. Fans gather, hold phones aloft like lanterns, chant her intro line until it sounds like a spell. Someone projects the last clean frame against the hotel wall. Someone else sells bracelets with her catchphrase, promising proceeds to a charity that hasn't replied yet. Within hours, the hashtag is a tapestry of sincerity, and sabotage heartfelt clips, weaponized edits, and the inevitable doxing disguised as accountability, turning suspicion into coordinates. Detective Qureshi watches the crowd from a distance, counting not candles but cameras. He knows how quickly mourning curdles into momentum, how a narrative will conscript anyone with a signal. He keeps his notes private, because the investigation prefers quiet and the internet hates it. In the glow, strangers speak like friends, friends like spokespeople, and spokespeople like strangers. The building keeps its secrets by standing still. In a borrowed conference room, the team meets the morning that doesn't care what happened. Mara has 3 drafts: eulogy, manifesto, and nothing at all. Jonah brings a drive that feels like contraband. Raw files, the stairwell cam, the half-broken audio that doesn't lie so much as refuse to comfort. Ava's liaison recommends patience. The detective recommends silence. The internet recommends either everything or nothing, both immediately. Jonah argues to release a timeline with receipts, not spectacle but clarity. An antidote to the edits that turn horror into puzzle. Mara fears clarity without context will feed the beast it hopes to starve. They sit with the question that always arrives too late: who owns a story when the audience has already moved in? In the end, they choose glass over fog, publish the timestamps, publish the logs, name the absence where a person should be, and leave the space unfilled. It's not closure, it's a start line. Timelines are truth only when they agree with physics. Jonah and Detective Qureshi sit over a printout mosaic server, pings badge reader, logs, cellular handshakes that tell a city's heartbeat. The platform's archive reports the stream died at 90/12/1241. The stairwell camera timecodes show a last clean frame at 90/12/38. The hotel's door access log records a 3rd floor accept at 91/39. 3 clocks. 3 versions of the same second. Close enough to be coincidence, far enough to be intention. Qureshi circles the gap and calls it opportunity time. The cushion where a person can step into a story and edit it without touching a keyboard. Jonah flinches at the audible proof, a doubled footfall that returns every 4 steps, too regular to be building noise. The corrupted SD card from Lila's gimbal mounts as a ghost volume, empty until it isn't. Thumbnails without files, the architecture of a memory with the furniture removed. Something was here. It left impressions when it moved. Audio is honest in ways video won't be. Jonah runs spectral analysis on the last intact minute, carving signal from rain and ruin. The building's breath sits at 60 hertz. Lila's step pattern taps a human tempo. The anomaly rides behind it like a backup drummer. When she speaks, reverb blooms and dies. When he moves, reverb blooms and waits. That pause is mass and distance, a hint of heavier shoes, a body holding just beyond the corner to stay out of frame. Qureshi marks the points where echo overlaps with chat spikes, moments the crowd yelled, behind you before the stream delay should have allowed it. Someone inside the system was closer to live than they should be. A side camera, the tiny stairwell eye Jonah planted, coughs up a single salvageable image. A sleeve of gray wool, the hem napped from wear, passing a landing 6 seconds before the key reader goes green. It's not a face. It's a clock wearing clothes. Paper trails don't rust. They just bore people into ignoring them. Qureshi pulls the hotel's maintenance tickets and finds complaints about the third-floor reader moisture intrusion, intermittent failure. Accepts after cool down. He compares them to timestamps from a transit card pinged near the hotel. Anonymized data, legally neat, morally queasy, showing a device arriving minutes before Lila. Mara brings a folder of brand emails. A scheduling plug-in embedded a precise go-live window in a public-facing calendar cache, invisible unless you know where to look. Jonah winces. Predictability feels like betrayal when you're the one being predictable. In a quiet aside, Qureshi asks if anyone outside the team had the stairwell camera link. Jonah says no, then remembers one test. DM. He sent himself from Lila's account while troubleshooting. The platform logged it as user reported spam and quarantined it, except the quarantine created a preview, a ghost door with a peephole, waiting for the right eyes. The SD card yields when bribed with patience. Wow, it's before to stay. A data recovery rig stitches fragments into a jagged timeline, date stamps without frames, audio shards without context, and one partial thumbnail that resolves into a reflection. Lia's neon jacket, mirrored in a brass elevator dial. That shouldn't have been active. The elevator logs insist it was offline. The thumbnail insists it tried to wake. Ghosts don't press buttons. People do. Jonah overlays the recovered crumbs with a map of building, dead zones, and finds a path that stays just outside good signal until the final corridor. He knew the architecture, he says, which is another way of saying he understood her constraints. Mara watches the reconstruction and runs a different calculus: what to publish, what to hold. Truth, mishandled, becomes a weapon aimed at the wrong targets. But she also knows vacuum breeds myth. They agree on a compromise, release the timeline with artifacts, not conclusions, and let the gaps point rather than accuse. Publishing doesn't end a story, it accelerates it. The timeline post goes live, bare of flourish, thick with receipts. The internet does its bifurcation ritual, half gratitude, half appetite. Ocent sleuths thread theories with frightening competence. Charlatans paste arrows until the screen looks like a football play. Amid the noise, one reply matters a throwaway account posts a cropped still from a bus cam archive. Rain on glass. A figure in a gray beanie, looking up from a shelter as Lila passes. The city's transit FOIA portal confirms the timestamp. Qureshi exhales through his nose, a tiny victory shaped like dread. The figure isn't a myth, it's a routine. He follows the routine backward posts that celebrate counting fear. A username that mirrors Glacialo's cadence, a pattern of presence that predates Haviland. The terrifying truth sharpens, not that the algorithm demanded tragedy, but that it taught a student to predict exactly when one could be arranged. And the lesson took. Arrests are not climaxes, they're commas. Qureshi moves on evidence that would bore a headline: transit pings, shoe tread composites, a thrift receipt for a coat the color of wet concrete. Evan answers the door with the undramatic calm of someone who believes he's been collaborating with fate. He talks about cadence like a musician, about how Lila taught him when the city felt quiet enough to hear a person turn to content. He never touched her channel, he says. He only stepped into the blank spaces it left. That's the horror in plain clothes, intention without interference, a weaponized schedule. Jonah sits in another room listening to the interview through a speaker that hisses like the stairwell. He hears himself in Evan's vocabulary: latency, pattern, predictability. and wonders when the language of production became the dialect of predation. Qureshi doesn't argue with obsession. He inventories it, the way you count exits on a plane. Every item adds up to something devastatingly ordinary, a plan that relied on us doing exactly what we always do. The confession isn't a confession. It's a manifesto about inevitability. Evans says the system taught him the math of presence. If you know when a creator must be brave on schedule, you can be near bravery without being noticed. He says he never intended harm. Fascination is a word people use when they want intimacy without responsibility. Qureshi asks about the third floor door. Evans smiles and describes the chill that lives behind old key readers. How moisture buys you seconds if you let the diode breathe. Jonah pictures the exact moment green replaced red, and hates the elegance of the explanation. Mara listens later and feels the familiar pull to package shock into a warning that sells safety. But safety doesn't sell. Spectacle does. They can only name the dynamic, not domesticated a culture that conditions performers to arrive on cue, and rewards watchers who learn the cues too well. The elevator dial and the recovered thumbnail glints like a metronome. Timing isn't everything. It's everyone. Institutions prefer conclusions that fold into policy. Ava convenes a roundtable and speaks in careful architecture, expanded crisis tooling, improved delay disclosures, a promise to deprioritize dangerous escalations. It sounds like progress until you see the footnotes, exceptions for newsworthy live moments, pilot programs restricted to select partners, enforcement that learns at the same speed. Metrics accelerate. Mara wants to weaponize the day against the future, mandate buffer windows, obfuscate geotels, normalize stepping back. Jonah proposes dead zones in narratives, places where suspense yields to boredom on purpose. Ava nods, noting feasibility, already translating grief into tickets and timelines. The truth sits in the corner like an uninvited consultant. Systems built to maximize attention will always prefer the shortest path to it, and fear is fast. They agree on a public memo that reads like resolve, and a private one that reads like triage. Neither mentions Lila by name more than once, as if repetition could turn respect into exploitation. They publish a final cut that refuses to be a finale, a 12-minute reconstruction with gaps left visible. No music, captions that treat viewers like adults. Mara introduces it with a sentence that feels like a hand on your shoulder. You are owed clarity, not closure. Jonah narrates the physics, doors, delays, echoes, then steps back where the story stops, belonging to him. The stream ends on the empty corridor and stays there long enough to feel rude. Comments arrive like weather, gratitude, anger, conspiracy, resolve. A creator coalition signs a de-escalation pact that looks aspirational until you remember how rent works. Still, something shifts. Audiences practice letting a beat hang without demanding the next stop. It won't last everywhere, but it might last somewhere. And somewhere is how cultures turn. At the vigil's edge, Qureshi watches people forget to film for a breath. And in that breath, the building feels like a building again. Just walls and air, no plot. Here is the terrifying truth. Without ornament, she wanted followers, not a funeral. The algorithm did not push her down a stairwell, but it built a walkway lit in metrics and lined with applause, a route so bright that a man who studied her cadence could step in at the only moment when saying no would look like betrayal. Our clicks wrote the rehearsal schedule. Her sponsors set the call time. Her rivals tuned the orchestra. A stranger learned the score. None of us held the weapon, and all of us handed it polish. The final video isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by predictability, by the parts of ourselves that crave the clean geometry of a climax and ignore the cost of reaching it. If there is a lesson, it isn't fear of buildings or shadows. It's the radical act of leaving some beats unfilled, of letting suspense dissolve without a payoff, of allowing a person to stay a person when the chorus chants for more. Let the corridor stay empty.